I'd like to introduce our final speaker for today, Duncan Simester, who is a professor of marketing at MIT-Sloan Sloan School of Management, where he also holds the NTU chair in management science. Duncan is an expert on how economics and operations research contribute to our understanding of pricing, go-to-market decisions, and a lot more in terms of marketing and strategy challenges. So without further ado, I'll invite Professor Simester on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, thank you, the folks at Yale, for inviting me back to present my research here again. I've always enjoyed speaking at this conference, and I particularly enjoyed the presentations this afternoon. I thought I was hugely impressed. I'm a lifelong, because I'm come from New Zealand. Lifelong is probably a bit of a stretch, but I've been a Red Sox fan since about 1990. And just said to Adam, I was walking through Kenmore Square. We lived in Kenmore Square, which is right beside Fenway Park, for 17 years. I was walking through in 2004 when that Game 4 was on, and just before the game I was walking through, the tickets were less than face value. But it was raining that night, and we were 3-0 down, and so we didn't go to the game. Anyway, I did go to the World Series game when we won in 2013, though. That was good. Okay, so let me also add, I've seen a lot of business school buildings. I want to say I've seen most of the business school buildings. This is the most impressive business school building I think I've ever seen. It's just, I haven't been here for 4 or 5 years. It's hugely impressive, so congratulations to Yale on that. Okay, so I'm going to present some research. And I've been a professor now for 24 years, 25 years. I think some of these results I'm going to present today are some of the most surprising results that we've seen. And so, we work with a lot of companies. We worked with a lot of companies over those years, probably 12, 13, 14 companies. I think some of the results I'm going to show you are sort of shocking, actually, shocking. And then at the end, I'm going to point out it's sort of surprising that we're surprised. It's going to be like, okay, if these big effects are going on, why haven't we seen them before? It's good. So I'm going to spend 5 or 10 minutes, well, maybe 5 minutes talking about the first piece of research we did on this, which was published a couple of years ago. But the way we did that research, we're going to reuse. So we're going to have to focus really hard for the first 5 minutes. I'm going to show you how we're going to identify some effects. And then I'm going to show you a whole bunch of results using the same approach. So, it's good. Harbingers of Failure. So we were working with a very big CPG retailer, think Walmart or Walgreens, somebody like that, and we could see new products coming into their stores. And we can see whether the products succeed or not. And so we asked, are there some customers who systematically buy the products that fail? So are there some customers, these harbingers of failure, who systematically buy the products that fail? And the answer is going to turn out to be a resounding yes. So the first paper was really about this. So at this retailer, about 40% of their products failed. We call them failed. And so they weren't being sold 3 years later. But it doesn't really matter how you define success or failure. But in this case, not being sold 3 years later. And this is the bit I want you to focus on, is how we're going to identify this effect. What we do is we break the products into 2 groups. And so the first group we're going to call the classification set, and there were 5,000 or so of those products, and we observe which customers buy those products in the first 15 weeks that they arrive in the store. But we also observe, did the products succeed or not? So for each customer, we can say, okay, here's somebody who buys the failures, and here's somebody who buys the successes. Good, so first set of products we're going to use to classify the customers. See where they purchased the product in the first 15 weeks that the products come into the store. And did the products they buy, the new products they buy, did they succeed or fail? And so now we're going to group the customers according to whether they succeed or failed. And we're going to use that to predict the success of the second set of products. Good, so we're going to have 4 groups of customers. In group 1 are the people who buy the new products who succeed. Group 4 are the guys who buy the products who fail, these harbingers of failure. And it's essentially quartile splits. It's about a quarter of the customers in each group. Good. So then for the holdout sample, for that prediction set, the second set of products, we ask, can we predict whether the second set of products succeeded or not, based on who purchased the product? Good. So the benchmark, which most retailers and most manufacturers look at, is just total orders. Look at how many people purchased the product in the first 15 weeks. Does that predict whether the product will succeed or not? And the answer is obviously going to be yes. The more people who purchase it in the first 15 weeks, the more likely the product is to succeed. But the question we ask is, okay, if we look at who's purchasing those products, does that provide more information about whether the product's succeeding or not? And if Shane up here was one of the harbingers for the original set of products, and Shane now Shane probably is a harbinger, I know him very well. If Shane purchased one of these other set of new products, is that a signal that that new product will fail? Good, clear. So the only difference we're making here is instead of counting total orders in the first 15 weeks, we're asking which customers purchased those products. Is it the people who purchased the other products that failed, or is it the people who purchased the other products that succeeded? Good. And so here was the big result in the paper. It's probably the key result in the paper. I've got a clicker here. Good. So it turns out more purchases, if you look at total orders, means more likely to succeed. And it would be very surprising if that wasn't true. But the most interesting aspect of that is this stuff down here. So these are the guys who purchased the other products that failed in the classification set. So if Shane purchased the other products that failed, then the new set of new products come in. If he also purchases those new products, it's a signal the product will also fail. And that's a pretty strong result, because you think more purchasing is good. It turns out more purchasing by Shane, bad. Very bad. And the effects are going to be pretty big. Good. So the study's all about sort of replicating that. I think there's two things that are particularly interesting about it. One is, it's not only if Shane, is Shane still here? Excellent, excellent. So it's not only if Shane purchased the new product once, but if he repeatedly purchases the new product, it's an even stronger signal that that new product is going to fail. And so I think that was intriguing. So then the second thing that's really intriguing about it is it's cross-category. What do I mean by cross-category? So if in those products were used to classify the customers into the 4 groups, let's imagine that those were all toothpastes. They were all, say, maybe sort of health and beauty items. Then the prediction set are all food products. It still works. So the classification can be done with one product category. So a group identify the Shanes using one product category. It can predict new product success in a different category. Okay, so this study got a fair amount of attention. It was published about 18 months, 2 years ago. A fair amount of attention. And so one of my colleagues on the paper is Catherine Tucker, is a colleague at MIT. We were at dinner one night, and it was getting late, and we were talking about this paper. We were thinking, what was the most surprising aspect of it? And I think it's that cross-category effect. Because this is really a story about preferences. Some customers have unusual preferences. Like some people like yellow nail polish. Not many people like. Some people like watermelon Oreo cookies. Not very many people like watermelon Oreo cookies. So it turns out if these harbingers like the product, it's a signal that the mass market won't like them. It's a signal that the product's going to be liked by people with niche preferences instead of mainstream preferences. And that explains the product failure. So the cross-category aspect of that is, I think, particularly surprising. Because it turns out the people who like the yellow nail polish also like watermelon Oreo cookies. So their niche preferences in one product category predicts niche preferences in a completely different product category. Okay, so Catherine and I are talking about this, and we thought, well, what is the limit to that effect? So what is the limit? How different can the product categories be, or how different can the decisions be? And these harbingers niche preferences sort of predict niche preferences in the other category. So that's what I'm going to show you. And I'm going to show you some results that you're going to be thinking about Yankee and Red Sox fans. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so sort of new study, thing we've been working on the last 6 months or so. Okay, so we're going to do three things. First thing we're going to do is, instead of identifying individuals as harbingers, we're going to identify zip codes. So it turns out there's going to be zip codes that have clusters of Shanes. There's going to be the Shane clusters. Good, so Harbinger zip codes. And why are we looking, so I will tell you that when we started this, I thought there's no chance we're going to see a zip code effect. There is no chance we're going to see harbingers clustered by zip codes. I was dead wrong. Hugely helpful though, because now it's going to be we can identify across lots of different decisions at a zip code level, all sorts of things. But at an individual customer level, it's pretty hard to track things across retailers or across purchasing situations. At a zip code level, you're going to see we're going to do we can compare a lot of different types of decisions. So good, so zip codes. What we're going to do is we're going to use Harbinger zip codes identified using purchases from one retailer to compare the types of products they purchase at other retailers. We're also going to compare their donations to congressional election campaigns, and we're going to compare the changes in their house prices. So it turns out that their unusual preferences are going to lead to unusual decisions across sort of a remarkable range of contexts. I'll tell you that we've been looking for the boundary to the effect. We haven't found it yet. We just keep seeing these unusual purchases. Okay, good. And then we can say a little bit about where it comes from. Is it the case that somebody moves into a zip code and they acquire harbinger preferences? Or is it a case that the harbingers tend to move to zip codes where other harbingers live? I'll say a little bit about that. Okay, good. Clear? So first stuff, we're going to start at a company we call Mass Store. You want to think of a mass merchandise retailer, a very big one. Let me not say too much more about that. Okay, so new products coming in. Our measure of success is, did they survive 18 months or not? And we take out all the products that were intended to be sort of Christmas items or Easter items or such, the short-term products. Good. And so, again, same approach. That's why I showed you the previous study. The classification set we're going to use to group customers. And now we've got the group 1, the group 2, the group 3, and the group 4 customers, the Shanes. And we're going to use purchases by customers in each group to predict new product success in the holdout set. Good, good. So the first thing you see is, these are the average success rates for the products purchased by the customers in each group. And the group 1s are the guys who tend to purchase the products that are most likely to succeed. The group 4s, zip codes, this is at the zip code level, there's the lowest average success rate of the new products. But the differences aren't that big. I'll also add that there's hundreds of thousands of purchases behind those calculations. Right? We have a lot of data. Hundreds of thousands of purchases. But the differences don't look huge. This is a quartile split. Right? It's by quartile. Okay. Okay, good. So then we have the same model as before. What happens is the more people purchase, the more likely the holdout products are to succeed. No real surprise there. But here's the intriguing stuff. In the Harbinger zip codes, which were identified using a different set of products, the more customers from those Harbinger zip codes purchase this holdout set of products, the less likely the products are to succeed. Even though more purchasing is good, more purchasing by these zip codes, bad. And here's some measure of the explanatory value of the model. Right? So taking into account which customers are purchasing rather than just total purchasing is a huge improvement in the explanatory power of the model. Not a little bit, just a massive improvement in the explanatory power of the model. Good, good. Okay, so we can also look at existing items. This is going to be helpful for me when I go to the different retailer. So we ask, for the existing items, did these Harbinger zip codes tend to purchase different existing items than other zip codes did? So as opposed to new products, let's look at the existing products. And so to do that, what we do is we do a sort of frequency distribution of how frequently the items are purchased, and we get the lower tail. And the lower tail is defined by the least frequently purchased items that collectively add up to 10% of revenue. the bottom 10% of revenue. And we ask, how many of those niche items were purchased by each of these zip codes? What do we see? We see that for these are the Harbinger zip codes here, significantly more likely to purchase those niche items that other zip codes aren't purchasing. And this is all about their preferences are just not representative. Right? They've just got an unusual set of preferences. But at the this is not at the individual level, this is at the zip code level. At least they live together. All right, good, good. Clear? Clear? Okay, so that's all within one retailer so far. It's actually a different retailer than we did the first study with, but it's all within one retailer. Okay, now we're going to use these zip codes identified at mass store, right? We're going to identify the zip codes using new product purchases at mass store, and we're going to look at what happens when they go and buy from a direct mail apparel retailer. You want to think sort of the gap. Not the gap, but sort of the gap. Right? So another retailer, direct mail, private label. And so we're going to look at how these zip codes purchase, and we're only going to use their online sales. We're going to use their catalog and online sales. We're going to ask 4 questions. So first of all, do they buy items that their neighboring zip codes don't buy? Right? Do they buy niche items? Which is why I did the niche analysis before, so you can see what's coming. So first thing I ask is, do they buy niche items that the neighboring zip codes don't buy? Second thing I ask is, we've got all the product review data. Do they buy the products that get less favorable reviews? Do they buy the products that other customers return? And then I can also look at, if they move zip codes, what happens? If a customer moves zip codes, do their preferences change, or is it just the case that they tend to move where their fellow harbingers exist? Okay, good. So first of all, the niche items. These groups, remember, are identified at the mass merchandise retailer. Right? So we identify the zip codes using new products purchases from the mass merchandise retailer. And then we ask, well, how many niche items are purchased from the private label retailer by those zip codes? And it turns out that the Harbinger zip codes, the mass merchandise retailer, buy niche items at the apparel retailer as well. So not only across category, this is across retailer, like across store. What else? Well, here's the review data. This picture is particularly nice, right? So this is just the average product review, the average product rating for the products that customers in each zip code purchased. And so here are the Harbinger zip codes. They buy products that get significantly lower product ratings than. So Shane's buying the low product rating items, while the group 1 guys are the guys who buy the successes at mass store, also buy products with high product ratings at Apparelco. So they buy products that other customers don't like. We also see that with returns. So the Harbinger zip codes buy products that their neighboring zip codes, and I'm not talking different state, I mean their neighboring zip codes, other zip codes within the same 3-digit zip code, are more likely to return. But it's only returns due to not liking the item or being the wrong size. It's only the returns for those idiosyncratic reasons. It's not returns due to defects. We don't see the effect with returns due to defects. In other words, this is all about preferences. These guys have unusual preferences. They're buying items that their neighbors are returning because they don't like them. Good, good. And then we look at people who've moved. Right? So we look at people who change zip codes. And so we ask, do you acquire these unusual preferences, or do you just move into zip codes where your Shane moves into zip codes where fellow Shanes live? And so let's look at that last thing first. When people change zip codes, do they move to another Harbinger zip code or not? And so here's a pretty good way of looking at it. So on the rows here reflect the zip code you started in. So if you began in a group 2 zip code, you're going to be in this row. So there were 6,375 households that started in a Harbinger zip code, and there were 8,950 households that started in a group 1 zip code. Well, where did they go to? Well, the guys in the Group 1 zip codes tended to go to other Group 1 zip codes. The guys in the Harbinger zip codes tended to go to the other Harbinger zip codes. So secondly, we show, I'm not going to talk too much about it here, there's no evidence that actually their preferences are changing. There's no evidence that after they move, their preference for niche items and so forth change. This is all about people bringing their preferences with them rather than learning them when they get there. Good. 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 So we know it extends across retailers. We know it extends across product categories. We know we can identify this at the zip code level instead of having to do it at the individual customer level. And that's kind of a big deal for us. Well, it's a big deal for everyone. In fact, you know, what we're negotiating with the mass store company is to be able to publish the list of zip codes and what the average success rates are in each zip code. In which case, you guys can use the data to work out how bad these decisions are. Okay, and then we know they're bringing their preferences with them rather than learning them from their new neighbors. Okay, so then we ask, am I going to time? I'm doing well. Okay, so this notion that when people move, they bring their preferences with them, made us start thinking about, well, maybe that's affecting the change in their home values. So, you know, the story we had in mind was something like, well, most people like views of the ocean. Harbingers, not so much perhaps. Not so much perhaps. And they're clustering themselves together. Maybe that's affecting their home values. And so when we started looking at this home value stuff, question, Trulia, which was just purchased by Zillow, brought out a study which was right on point. Back in last August, they came out with a study that said, some people like McMansions. Most people don't like McMansions. Some people like McMansions. And if you like McMansions, you're not going to see as good an increase in your home values. So this notion of unusual preferences not only could be a function of which location you choose to live in, but also which housing stock you choose to buy. So we're going to look at what happens to the change in home values if you're in a Harbinger zip code versus a non-Harbinger zip code. And we're going to use very good data provided by Zillow. I won't talk too much about that. But here are the change in zip code, change in home values over a 14-year period. And these are our zip codes. These are zip codes we're using in the data. And you'll see there was a 5-year period where home values increased. These are year-on-year increases. 5-year period where home values decreased, shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, and then the home prices have bounced back again. So what we're going to look at is, I promise this is the only equation I'm going to show, is that here's the average success rate of new products purchased at Masco. Does that predict the change in your Zillow house prices? Controlling for your neighbor's change in house prices. Got to control for 3-digit fixed effects, but good. Okay, and so the way we're going to do it is, let me see if I can go back. Yeah, we're going to treat this as, go back. We're going to treat this as one period, this is another period, and this is a third period. Right, very simple. We're going to say between 2002 and 2006, how much did your house prices increase? And did it increase more if you were a Harbinger zip code or if you were in a non-Harbinger zip code? What do we see? What do we see? So what we see is, what these coefficients are showing is that for the non-Harbinger zip codes, there were much bigger house price increases. And note, these aren't small effects, right? Much bigger house price increases than for the Harbinger zip codes. So during periods where house prices were increasing, which was this period here and this period here, if you were in a Harbinger zip code, you had a significantly smaller house price increase. And we're talking sort of 35%. Of course, the zip codes that saw the house price increases were also the ones that saw the biggest decreases when house prices went down. Okay, so what have we discovered so far? We've learned that these guys systematically buy new products that fail at this mass merchandising company. So we've learned, first of all, that this occurs at a zip code level. It's not just an individual level. There are clusters of these customers. They systematically buy products that fail at one retailer. The same zip codes systematically buy products that fail at another retailer. They buy products that get worse customer reviews. They buy products that other customers are more likely to return. And their house prices don't increase as fast as their neighbors. Not good, not good. Okay, so the next thing we look at is which candidates do they contribute to in federal election campaigns? And so the beauty about, we actually can't see the voting data because the voting data is not available by zip code. But every time you make a federal election campaign donation, you have to give your address. And so we observe the zip code. So we can look at, do these Harbinger zip codes give to the same candidates as their neighboring zip codes? And I want to remind you, there's not just one or two of these Harbinger zip codes. These are quartile splits. So it's a quarter of the zip codes. Right? These Harbinger zip codes, it's a lot of zip codes. Okay, do they give to different candidates, and are their candidates more or less likely to win? Okay, so I promised there was no calculation, but essentially what we measure is, we look within a 3-digit zip code, which is 100 5-digit zip codes. We look at which two candidates get the most donations. And then we ask, for a specific zip code, did you give more or less to the top candidate? So our key measure here is, so don't think too much about this, our key measure here is, did you give more or less than your neighboring zip codes to the top candidate? That's what our measure is going to be. Good. Okay. And so the answer is the Harbinger zip codes. Remember, these are identified using new product purchases at this mass merchandise store. The Harbinger zip codes are less likely to donate to the candidates that their neighboring zip codes donate to. Systematically less likely to donate. Not only they make fewer donations, but they donate fewer dollars. So then we can ask, well, do their candidates win or not? And you can imagine, no, it's not good news there either. So good. So these Harbinger zip codes are clusters of these customers with systematically unusual preferences. And you don't want to think of one or two of these zip codes. You want to think of, there's a chunk of them, and easily identifiable. They make decisions that are different. We know they don't learn their preferences. They bring their preferences to the zip code. But here's the other thing which I think this makes this sort of particularly surprising. Not that many customers within a zip code purchase from mass store. Not that many customers within a zip code purchase from this private label apparel retailer. Very few customers donate to congressional election campaigns. And almost certainly, these are different customers. So it's not the case that it's the same person who's donating to mass store, or not the same case the same person who's donating to the apparel retailer. It's not the case that it's the same person, therefore, who's donating to the congressional election campaigns. Which I think makes the fact that we can observe clusters of these decisions particularly surprising. I'm happy they choose to live together, however. Okay, so good. So there's two more things we're doing. We just started a very big relationship with a big retirement. You want to think of somebody like Schwab. And we're going to look at the decisions. You can imagine what we're going to look at here, right? Decisions within brokerage accounts. When they make their stock choices, do they make good stock choices or bad stock choices? And again, we'll do it at the zip code level. And then we have a sort of a related study. This is a little bit of the project that keeps giving, because every time we have a glass of wine, we come up with a new topic. So the next initiative on this is Harbinger Products. So what I've shown you is there are some customers who predict whether new products will fail. Right? That's the whole Harbinger custom point is, are there customers whose purchases predict that a new product will fail? So now we've looked at the inverse. Are there some products that predict that a new customer will fail? In other words, are there some products that, if purchased on your first trip to the store, predict that that retailer won't retain that customer? And there's a pretty strong straw man here. More purchasing is good. But it's very clearly the case, right? So there are some products that have purchased, there are Harbinger products, essentially, that have purchased on the first trip become a signal that the new customer will fail, which is sort of directly the inverse of what's going on. Good. I'm done. Questions? I can take questions. Questions? Do you need a microphone?
No.
Yes.
I have two questions just to clarify. I'm curious about effects in the data. Did you see any effect by age in the customer groups? And the second is, it seems like this is a lifestyle for these customers, and so I'm wondering if you saw a difference between lifestyle products and products that are just toilet paper.
Yeah. So the effect began with toilet paper. The effect began once when we were doing stuff at Walgreens and Walmart type stores. The stuff is fairly mundane consumer packaged goods. So we do see an effect there. We do see different size effects in different categories. The effects are a little bit bigger in, say, beauty than they are in healthcare, but not in a meaningful way. We do know a lot about the demographics, particularly at the zip code level. We could talk a lot about that. I wouldn't say hugely interesting, but we do see that older customers have different preferences than younger customers. That's no great surprise, and people who are in more urban areas have slightly different preferences than people in less urban areas. But I don't think that's, interesting, the effects of IV more we control for that stuff. Yeah. Dave. It's going to be a bad question.
No, it may be a real simple question, which is I'm wondering if you controlled for the size of the market basket.
Sure.
And so I'm curious whether or not these harbingers are also buying successful products, or do they just buy a much greater variety and are variety seekers, and as a result, maybe have bigger families, as a result, more likely to buy the McMansions, et cetera. But I could weave a story.
Yeah, no.
That is a market basket effect.
Yeah, so we know a lot about that type of stuff. The differences actually aren't that big. And you can think that the degree of harbingerness it varies. So some buy almost only new products that fail. Some buy a mixture, and some buy only new products that succeed. And the effects are pretty clearly biggest amongst the people who buy the highest proportion of new products that fail. Right? So you can think of this as a continuous measure. Yeah. But the differences in there, so for example, in that first study, using that Walgreens type data, the differences in the frequency with which they visit the store and the size of their shopping baskets are negligible. Right? They're really pretty small. One more question? Sure.
Okay, I love this word. It's terrific. I just had this question. So could it be that certain people are better at predicting winners and then the other people aren't? I mean, so I'm just trying to sort out, is it the losers or is it the winners?
Yeah, so the inverse is also true, to your point, which is there are some people who are systematically better at predicting the new products that succeed. That's a lot less exciting for us. So clearly that is true. And I think that equation where I showed those negative coefficients means it's not just they're slightly worse at predicting winners, they're actually predicting losers. Right? So it's actually they're predicting losers. Of course, what makes this intriguing is the straw man argument is pretty strong. Right? More purchasing, more likely new product is to succeed. And so you've got to, for this effect to occur, you've got to overcome that straw man. For these guys, more purchasing, less likely to succeed. Yeah. Good. Thank you, guys.